I thought it made sense to start if the overall topic is the resurgence of the labor movement. Some people here may be aware, and I'm guessing some people aren't aware, that the votes were counted yesterday in what I think is likely to be the largest union election in America this year. 19,000 student assistants at the California State University system petitioned the Public Employee Relations Board in California to have an election. The unit is 19,000 people, and they voted yesterday 7,050 to 202 to organize themselves. It is the first unit of undergraduate students, to the best of my knowledge, that's been organized anywhere, and I just think it's a really exciting thing, because by definition, if you're talking about undergrads, you're talking about young people. So here's the way I think about this and the way we talk about this in UHW, and I'd put it this way to this group, that we have what I would call an order of magnitude problem. Just a couple of quick little numbers, and these are not precise, but I think everybody will get the point, because they're basically correct. The U.S. workforce is 150 million people. There are 15 million union members in America, all unions, all sectors. A majority of those 15 million union members are public employees of one variety or another. They are not private sector workers. 10% of the U.S. workforce, therefore, is organized, most of them public employees. 6% of the private sector workforce is part of a union. And what we all, I think, come up with is this idea that back in the days of the CIO, right, the power of the American labor movement was concentrated in core industries that really dominated the economy through the core of the private sector. Last year in this, we've talked about this kind of upsurge in awareness and class consciousness, or consciousness of class, or whatever it might be. But to go from a 10% movement to an 11% movement, we have to add 1.5 million union members under contract. Workforce of 150 million people, 1.5 is 1%. Last year, in the resurgence of private sector organizing currently underway, all unions in the NLRB, all elections, 100,000 people total voted whether or not to join a union. One more point of unionization is 1.5 million people. 100,000 people voted. They didn't all win. And we all know half of those who vote to get the union never get a contract. So we have at least an order of magnitude problem. How do we rebuild this thing? It's simple arithmetic. And if the hole you are in is that big, our view is you got to try a whole bunch of things, because no organization, no institution, no entity in the world can get at least, at a minimum, one order of magnitude better unless we're doing a whole lot of stuff we're not doing right now. And so this calls into, the discussion, all kinds of things. So what I want to share with you is we are believers in experimentation. We recognize that we're a pretty big organization, and we are appreciative that we are at a scale in terms of our organization and the resources that we have, that we're able to do some things, and we don't believe we can succeed unless lots of people out there are succeeding in all kinds of ways, and we have to have just a quantum leap in terms of the activity that's going on. So scale matters, resources matter, people matter, leadership matters. All of these things matter. You can't get to that level of growth unless you're campaigning for probably twice as many workers. And so in a 100,000 person organization, if you want to grow by 25,000, you got to campaign to 50,000. But what is amazing right now is we can imagine campaigns. That's what's different now that wasn't true 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when you just couldn't imagine going to, for instance, Fresno, California, where the largest non-union hospital, anywhere between Sacramento and Los Angeles is 8,000 people, totally non-union. And all of a sudden, there's a sense, we have 1,500 Kaiser members who live in that community. There's a sense we can organize this place. That didn't exist 3 years ago, it didn't exist 5 years ago, and I don't know that it's going to exist 5 years from now. We have a window right now, and that's part of what we're trying to say. But the first thing we're doing is we're saying to ourselves, we're going to throw everything we got at trying to organize at a level that we've never been capable of doing before, and it's going to take the total reorientation of our organization, and it's going to take a lot of resources to do it. One thing I want to mention, and I think we're all a little hesitant sometimes to talk about money and financial resources in the union. It's kind of a subject that gets talked about in the corners or at the bar, but not often enough out in the open. And I just want to say to people that if we're going to dig out of this order of magnitude problem, it's going to take a level of financial commitment that we have just not made in decades and decades and decades. And when the mine workers and John Lewis created the CIO, the mine workers paid for it, and they spent a ton of money to get that done, and we got to find the resources to do it. So our organization, I'm going to show you a little bit of our underwear here. We have a budget. You could go online and see it or pull the files, but our annual budget is $125 million. And we're prepared to spend a third of that, if need be, if we can find the campaigns to get this done. Our members pay relatively high dues. 40% of our members give to our hard money political action fund. And the point I want to make here is that workers and regular people will put up the money if we have the hard conversation and we're willing to, again, let's be frank with each other. If we want to change the world, we want to change our lives, you're not going to do it on the cheap, and we're fighting people like Google and Amazon, hospitals, whoever, that got tons and tons of money. So that's one thing, 25,000. Second thing I want to mention is that we have a non-NLRB thing called Healthcare Rising Arizona. 2,000 plus people are now paying dues of $20 a month here in Arizona to build a non-collective bargaining organization. There's more of that going on. You heard about the fast food stuff yesterday. The one thing I want to say about this is that these things don't pay for themselves. They have to be subsidized by other parts of the organization. I think they're experiments worth doing, but you have to get to a scale in non-collective bargaining, direct, voluntary type organizations where people can come and go at a whim. And here in Arizona, in 2016, I was talking with somebody at lunch today. I'm not from California, went to California. You hear all about these ballot initiatives, and I thought, well, surely you must have to go through some kind of a screening process to get on the ballot. And then I learned, obviously, that all you got to do is have the signatures, and you can put any damn thing on the ballot you want to put on. And I asked myself, why don't we use this more often? Back then we were playing a lot of defense. So we created an organization, again, another experiment called the Fairness Project. We've run 35 state-level ballot campaigns across the United States in the last 7 years, mostly minimum wage and Medicaid expansion. We've won 33 of them. In 2016, the minimum wage in Arizona was $8.05 an hour. Today, it's $14.45 and indexed to inflation. That's a cool thing, but then here's what I worry about. So $12,000 a year for a full-time minimum wage worker, and 1 million people got a pay raise. That cost us $1.5 million to win that. We bargained the Kaiser contract, we bargained contracts. I have never in my life come within 10 country miles of bargaining $12,000 for 1 million people. But direct democracy made it happen. American workers will do stuff that legislatures won't do. Voters will do stuff that legislatures won't do. The value of what we've won across America, minimum wage, Medicaid expansion, is now approaching $25 billion per year. On a $75 million investment, we got to think differently about resources. How do we build organizations around that? Last thing I want to say, and then I'll get out of the way here. People matter, leadership matters. If we're going to deal with this order of magnitude problem, we need tens of thousands of rank and filers who are prepared to talk to non-union workers all across America. We don't have them. We don't have them. I don't think the UAW has them. We can't keep up with the campaigns we can see in our own organization right now in California. Workers want unions, and we don't have the people to talk to them, and we have to solve this problem. And I welcome the opportunity to follow up with anybody anywhere about how do we build a cadre of at least 25,000 trained rank and file workers to talk to non-union people all across America. And that's not always easy with our employers. So we've got tons of resource challenges. We've got an order of magnitude problem, but we also have conditions that I would argue are qualitatively different than anything we've ever had before. We got to throw everything we have at this. That's what we're doing to experiment. Thanks for listening. Thanks.